Alright, good day. So today we're going to be doing the product of array except self on LeetCode. So let's just get right into the description of the problem here. So given an integer array nums, return an array answer such that answer I is equal to the product of all the elements of nums except nums I. So the product of any prefix or suffix of nums is guaranteed to fit in a 32-bit integer. So we must write the algorithm that runs an O of n time without using the division operation. So if we look at the input here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and our output is 24, 12, 8, 6. So just looking at it, so that value 24, that is 2 by 3 by 4. The 12 there would be 1 by 3 by 4, so you'd be leaving out the 2. The value 8 would be 1 by 2 by 4, so we're leaving out the 3. And then the final value 6 would be equal to 1 by 2 by 3. So let's just get right into the solution. So the input would be our nums array, and our output would be our, well, it would just be an integer array of numbers. So for every item in the array, we want to return an array where the value stored at the index is equal to the product of every item in the array besides the current item. In order to do this, we're going to have to keep track of the prefix and the postfix values. So we're going to have to go through the array 2 times. Once to get the prefix values and once to get the postfix values, and then we're gonna have to do this one final time to actually calculate what the product would be. So the prefix would be an array containing the value of the products up until a given index, and then the postfix would be an array containing the values of the products after a given index. So if we just look at some of the pseudocode here, so to find a prefix, for I in range length of nums, so we're going to be going from 0 until the length of the nums array. If we're in the first position, so this is kind of just a check. If we're in the first position of the nums index, then we just want to assign the prefix. That's supposed to be prefix. And we just want to assign the prefix value to be the value of, then we just want the prefix value at location 0 to be equal to that num0, and that's just because we don't really have anything to multiply before, so it will just be that value. So our else condition now, so this is kind of where it happens. This is what's calculating the prefix. So the prefix I is equal to the prefix at I minus 1, so the previous value that's stored in the prefix multiplied by nums at that location. So it's going to give us the product. So if we were to look at this input array here, for location 1 would be 1, location 2 would be 2 multiplied by 1, so 2, and then you store 2 in the prefix, and then location 3 would be 3 multiplied by the previous location in prefix, so that would be 6, and then for 4 we'll have to do the previous location in prefix, which would be I think it was 6 I said times 4, so that'll give us 24, and so now the postfix. So the postfix is kind of the opposite of the prefix. We're trying to find the values of the products after a given index. So we're going to be starting from the end and go backwards. And it's basically just the reverse of the prefix. So we're going to go from the I in the range length of nums minus 1 so that we stay within the bounds of the array. We're ending at 0, decremented by 1. So in a similar case to the previous, the prefix, if the length at the value of the length of the nums, we want to make nums minus 1, length of nums minus 1, we want to make sure that we don't go out of bounds there, because we won't be able to get the previous one, the I plus 1. So we just assign it to the value, this value here. Well, we're not doing that because of this, but we are just assigning that value because there's nothing before it. So it would just be whatever value is stored in that final position. Otherwise, what we want to do is we want to look at the postfix plus 1, so the next value in the postfix, and multiply it by the current. So it's basically just the same thing that we do in reverse. So after we do that, we just need to find a way to multiply the postfix and the prefix by each other at the location I in nums. So let's just go through the actual code here. So first off, we want to get the value for all the numbers before the index. So if I equals 0, then the prefix I equal to nums I, prefix I equal I minus 1 multiplied by the nums I, could probably take this off actually. It's not supposed to be there. Right, yeah. So if we have the the prefix is basically just going to store those values, those multiplicative, those products, sorry, and then we're going to go through here and just as we said, start from end, go backwards, get the postfix values up until that point, I plus 1 multiplied by nums I, and we store it in the postfix. So this is kind of what the pseudocode didn't really go through, was this multiplication here to get the value. So at the beginning of the array, it's just going to be postfix. This is going to be 1 multiplied by the second postfix, so basically second postfix here. So we just have that value. Else if I equal to the length of nums minus 1. So this would be our situation where it's at the end. We just want to take the second to last prefix value. Otherwise, we just multiply nums I would be equal to the prefix value multiplied by the postfix value at the... So remember how prefix and postfix are storing it. We don't want to get the actual I value for the prefix and the postfix. We want to get the previous one because the previous one is the product which will not contain the value at nums I. So if you were to use nums I here and postfix I, those would be inclusive of the value at I. So you just want to make sure and like offset it so that we don't use that actual value. So yeah, not the best runtime. But yeah, and it would, well, we have these for loops here. They go through it once each, so O of n time. And then for space, we do create like 3 extra structures. I'm pretty sure there's probably a way to do it in place, or at least with maybe like one other instead of just using the 2. But this is, I tried it for a little bit, but I couldn't really come up with anything for it. So yeah, so this would be my solution for this. Thank you.